He knelt down on the road, lowering his massive frame into a position of vulnerability that no wild silverback should ever assume in the presence of humans. Then he began to vocalize, not the aggressive chest-beating display that might be expected, but a series of low, mournful sounds that seemed to carry the weight of a father's desperate plea for help. He's asking for help, Emmanuel whispered, his voice filled with wonder and heartbreak. I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of working with gorillas. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the spell. A convoy of park rangers and anti-poaching units had responded to the reports of gunfire, their vehicles kicking up clouds of dust as they navigated the winding mountain road. The lead vehicle was driven by Dr. James Tuisinge, the park's chief veterinarian, whose presence offered a glimmer of hope in the desperate situation. Behind him came additional rangers, emergency medical equipment, and a team of gorilla experts who had been summoned to deal with whatever crisis had emerged. But as Dr. Tuisinge's vehicle approached the scene, the gorilla family's reaction was immediate and alarming. The adult females began to vocalize in distress, clutching their young closer while the juveniles showed signs of panic. They're afraid, Dr. Mitchell observed. They approached us because we're researchers. They've seen us before, but they don't trust the others. Makara himself seemed torn between his need for help and his instinct to protect his family. He rose from his kneeling position and began to pace, his massive frame radiating tension and internal conflict. That's when Dr. Mitchell made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She slowly opened the vehicle door and stepped out, her movements careful and deliberate. Sarah? No, Jenny called out, but Dr. Mitchell was already committed to her course of action. She had spent 5 years studying the Amahoro group, watching them from a respectful distance and documenting their behavior. She knew each individual, understood their personalities and relationships, and had developed the kind of rapport that only comes from years of patient observation. Makara, she said softly, using the gentle, low-pitched vocalizations that gorilla researchers employ to communicate non-aggression. I know you're scared. I know you want to help, Kubana. Let me try to help too. The silverback's response was immediate and overwhelming. He approached Dr. Mitchell slowly, his massive form moving with surprising grace. When he was close enough to touch her, he stopped and extended one enormous hand toward her, a gesture of trust that defied every principle of wild animal behavior. Dr. Mitchell felt tears streaming down her face as she gently touched the gorilla's hand. The connection between human and gorilla, between two species sharing a moment of profound understanding, was electric. Dr. Tuisinge, she called over her shoulder, bring your medical kit. Slowly. Let them see that you're here to help. The park veterinarian approached cautiously, his emergency medical supplies in hand. He had treated injured gorillas before, but never under these circumstances. Never with the full cooperation and trust of the animal's family group. Nyota, still cradling the wounded Kubana, watched the approaching humans with eyes that seemed to hold both hope and terror. The injured gorilla's breathing was labored, and blood continued to seep from wounds in his chest and shoulder. The bullets are still in him, Dr. Tuisinge observed after a careful visual examination. We need to get him to the veterinary clinic immediately, but I don't know how we're going to transport him. An injured gorilla this size. They'll help us, Dr. Mitchell said with sudden certainty. Look at them. They're not just asking for help. They're offering to cooperate. What happened next would be documented in wildlife journals and conservation textbooks for decades to come. At Dr. Mitchell's gentle urging, Nyota began to move toward the research vehicle, still carrying her wounded son. The other gorillas formed a protective escort, their presence both supportive and vigilant. The logistics of transporting a 180-kilogram injured gorilla were staggering, but the family group's cooperation made the impossible achievable. Makara and two of the adult females helped lift Kubana into the modified rear section of the veterinary vehicle, their enormous strength making the transfer possible. Throughout the process, Kubana remained conscious but clearly in shock. His eyes, normally bright and alert, were dulled with pain and trauma. But when Dr. Mitchell spoke to him in soft, reassuring tones, he responded with quiet vocalizations that seemed to acknowledge her presence. You're going to be okay, she whispered, her hand gently stroking his massive head. We're going to take care of you. The journey to the veterinary clinic became a funeral procession unlike anything the mountain roads had ever witnessed. The gorilla family walked alongside the slow-moving vehicles, their formation never breaking despite the distance and difficult terrain. Other research teams and park staff lined the route, many of them in tears at the sight of this extraordinary display of interspecies cooperation. Cell phone cameras captured images that would circle the globe within hours, a wounded gorilla being escorted to safety by his family and human caregivers working together in unprecedented harmony. At the clinic, Dr. Tuyisinj and his team worked frantically to stabilize Kubana's condition. X-rays revealed the extent of his injuries. 2 bullets had lodged in his chest, missing his heart by mere centimeters. One had fractured a rib and was dangerously close to his lung. "It's going to be touch and go," Dr. Tuyisinj explained to the gathered team. "He's lost a lot of blood, and the trauma to his system is severe. But he's young and strong, and gorillas are remarkably resilient." Outside the clinic, the gorilla family maintained their vigil. Makara had positioned himself near the main entrance, his massive frame serving as both guardian and beacon of hope. The other family members foraged nearby but never strayed far from the building where their loved one fought for his life. Dr. Mitchell found herself serving as liaison between the medical team and the gorilla family, a role that required her to draw on every instinct she had developed during her years of primate research. She understood that the gorilla's presence was not just emotional support. It was a form of communication, a way of telling the humans that they were not alone in this fight. The surgery to remove the bullets took 6 hours. Dr. Tuyisinj worked with skill and precision, guided by years of experience with gorilla anatomy and supported by a team of veterinary specialists who had been flown in from Kigali. Throughout the procedure, updates were regularly provided to the family group outside. Dr. Mitchell would emerge from the clinic to speak to Makara in the gentle vocalizations that had become their shared language, letting him know that his son was still fighting. The Silverback's responses were heartbreaking in their humanity. He would look directly at Dr. Mitchell, his intelligent eyes searching her face for signs of hope or despair. When she conveyed positive updates, his massive shoulders would relax slightly. When the news was uncertain, his distress was palpable. "He understands," Dr. Mitchell told the medical team during a brief break. "He knows we're trying to save Kubana, and he's trusting us with his son's life." The breakthrough came at 2:17 a.m., when Kubana's vital signs finally stabilized. Both bullets had been successfully removed, his wounds had been cleaned and sutured, and he was breathing normally under anesthesia. Dr. Mitchell emerged from the clinic to find the entire gorilla family still maintaining their vigil. Despite the late hour and the cool mountain air, they had not moved from their positions around the building. "He's going to make it," she told Makara, her voice choked with emotion. "Your son is going to survive." The Silverback's response was immediate and overwhelming. He rose to his full height and began to vocalize, not the aggressive chest-beating display of territorial dominance, but a series of deep, joyful calls that seemed to echo across the entire mountainside. The other gorillas joined in, creating a symphony of celebration that could be heard for miles. Other gorilla groups throughout the park responded with their own calls, creating a network of communication that spoke to the deep bonds that connect all living things. Recovery was slow but steady. Kubana remained in the clinic for 2 weeks, his wounds healing under the careful supervision of Dr. Tuyisinj and his team. Throughout this time, his family never left the area, foraging nearby and maintaining their protective presence. The bond between the gorilla family and the human caregivers deepened during this period. Dr. Mitchell found herself spending entire days with the gorillas, documenting their behavior and marveling at their capacity for emotional expression. "They're grieving," she noted in her research journal, "but they're also hopeful. They understand that healing takes time, and they're willing to wait." The moment when Kubana was finally strong enough to rejoin his family was captured on camera and broadcast around the world. The reunion was emotional beyond description, a testament to the power of family bonds that transcend species barriers. Makara approached his recovering son with infinite gentleness, his massive hands carefully examining the healing wounds. Nyota groomed Kubana with the tender attention of a mother who had thought she might lose her child. The juveniles and other family members took turns welcoming him back with gentle touches and soft vocalizations. But perhaps the most moving moment came when Kubana approached Dr. Mitchell. The young gorilla, still weak but determined, extended his hand toward the human who had helped save his life. The gesture was one of gratitude and recognition, an acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged in the crucible of crisis. Dr. Mitchell took his hand, tears streaming down her face as she felt the strength returning to his grip. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "You're going to grow up strong and start your own family someday." The impact of Kubana's rescue extended far beyond the immediate medical success. The unprecedented cooperation between humans and gorillas sparked a revolution in conservation thinking. demonstrating that wild animals are capable of far more complex emotional and cognitive responses than previously understood. The story attracted global attention, with wildlife photographers, documentary filmmakers, and conservation organizations flooding into Rwanda to document the aftermath of the rescue. The images of gorillas and humans working together became symbols of hope in a world where human-wildlife conflict often dominates the headlines. Dr. Mitchell found herself at the center of a media storm she had never anticipated. Scientists, conservationists, and animal rights advocates sought her insights into the behavior she had witnessed. Her research papers on the incident were published in the world's most prestigious journals, fundamentally changing how primatologists viewed gorilla intelligence and emotional capacity. But for Dr. Mitchell, the most important outcome was the ongoing relationship she maintained with the Amahoro group. Her rescue of Kubana had earned her a unique position of trust within the gorilla family, allowing her to conduct research that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. "They see me as part of their extended family now," she explained to a documentary crew 6 months after the rescue. "It's not that I'm a gorilla, but I'm no longer seen as a threat. I'm seen as an ally, someone who can be trusted when help is needed." The poachers who had shot Kubana were eventually captured and prosecuted, their arrest made possible by the extensive evidence collected at the scene and the testimony of the research team. Their conviction sent a strong message about Rwanda's commitment to protecting its mountain gorilla population. But the most lasting legacy of the incident was the change it brought to human-gorilla relations throughout the region. Other gorilla groups began to show less fear of researchers and park staff, seemingly aware that humans could be allies rather than threats. Kubana's recovery was complete within 6 months. He grew into a magnificent silverback, his brush with death leaving no lasting physical effects. But the emotional impact of his rescue remained with him throughout his life, manifesting in an unusual tolerance for human presence that made him one of the most photographed gorillas in the world. His story became a centerpiece of conservation education programs, inspiring a new generation of wildlife protectors and demonstrating the profound connections that exist between humans and our closest living relatives. The exact spot on the mountain road where Makara had first blocked the vehicle became known as Kubana's Crossing, marked by a memorial plaque that told the story of the day when a gorilla family's desperate plea for help changed everything scientists thought they knew about animal behavior. Dr. Mitchell continued her research in Rwanda for another 10 years, her work fundamentally shaped by the trust that had been placed in her during that crucial moment of crisis. She published a book about the experience, titled The Gorilla Who Asked for Help, which became a bestseller and further raised awareness about mountain gorilla conservation. The research station established additional protocols for handling wildlife emergencies, with Dr. Mitchell's experience serving as a template for future human-gorilla cooperation. The success of Kubana's rescue proved that with patience, understanding, and mutual respect, the barriers between human and wild could be crossed when life hung in the balance. Years later, as Dr. Mitchell prepared to retire from active field research, she made one final visit to the Amahoro group. Kubana, now a fully mature silverback with a family of his own, approached her with the same gentle curiosity he had shown as a recovering youngster. The scientist and the gorilla sat together in the mountain meadow where they had first formed their bond, two beings from different worlds connected by a shared experience of crisis and hope. Dr. Mitchell reflected on how that desperate morning had changed not just her understanding of gorilla behavior, but her entire perspective on the relationship between humans and the natural world. "We're not separate from nature," she wrote in her final research paper. "We're part of it, and when we remember that connection, when we respond to the calls for help that come from the wild, we don't just save individual animals, we save a part of ourselves." The story of Kubana and his family became a cornerstone of conservation education, demonstrating that the most powerful force for protecting wildlife isn't fear or regulation, but love and understanding. It proved that when animals are in desperate need, they can recognize potential allies and reach across the species divide to ask for help. And most importantly, it showed that humans, at our best, are capable of hearing those calls and responding with compassion, skill, and unwavering commitment to preserving the magnificent diversity of life on our shared planet. The mountain road is clear now, but the lesson remains. Sometimes the most important journeys begin when we're forced to stop and listen to what the wild is trying to tell us. And sometimes, the greatest acts of conservation come not from those who are strongest, but from those who are willing to trust in the goodness of others, even when everything seems impossible. This is the story of Kubana, the gorilla who was shot by poachers but lived because his family refused to give up on him. and because strangers became allies when love and desperation demanded it. It is a story of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living things, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4, whether they speak with words or with the universal language of a parent's love for their child. Thank you for watching this video. I would be grateful for your like. Please do not forget to subscribe so as not to miss other interesting stories. See you soon. The morning mist clung to the emerald slopes of Rwanda Volcanoes National Park like a protective shroud, filtering the early sunlight into ethereal beams that danced through the ancient forest canopy. It was 7:30 a.m. when the first shots echoed through the mountain silence, their sharp reports cutting through the peaceful dawn like a blade through silk. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a primatologist from Oxford University, was leading a small research expedition along the winding dirt road that connected the park's main gate to the research station deeper in the mountains. Her team consisted of 3 graduate students, a local guide named Emmanuel Uwamana, and 2 park rangers who provided security for researchers venturing into the gorilla habitat. "Did you hear that?" whispered Jenny Morrison, a doctoral student from Vancouver, her voice barely audible above the rumble of their Land Rover's engine. Dr. Mitchell raised her hand, signaling Emmanuel to stop the vehicle. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant calls of colobus monkeys and the gentle whisper of wind through bamboo groves. "Gunshots," confirmed Ranger Patrick Nzeyimana, his weathered face grim with concern. "Probably poachers. We need to radio this in immediately." But before anyone could reach for the radio, a sound emerged from the forest that made every person in the vehicle freeze with terror and amazement. It was a deep, resonant hooting call, the distinctive vocalization of a mountain gorilla in extreme distress. The call was answered by others, creating a symphony of anguish that seemed to come from all directions. Emmanuel, who had been guiding researchers and tourists through these mountains for over 20 years, had never heard anything like it. "Something terrible has happened," he said, his voice heavy with foreboding. "The gorillas, they're calling for help." What emerged from the forest 30 minutes later defied every principle of wildlife behavior that the researchers thought they understood. Leading a procession of 8 mountain gorillas down the narrow road was Makara, the massive silverback patriarch of the Amahoro group, one of the most studied gorilla families in the park. But Makara wasn't displaying the typical behavior of a silverback protecting his territory. Instead, he was moving with deliberate, almost human-like purpose, his enormous frame blocking the entire width of the road as he positioned himself directly in front of the research vehicle. Behind him, the rest of his family group arranged themselves in a formation that was both protective and pleading. 3 adult females, 2 juveniles, and 1 adolescent male created a living barrier that made it impossible for the vehicle to pass. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Mitchell breathed, her scientific training warring with her emotional response to the extraordinary scene before them. "Gorillas don't approach humans like this. They don't block roads. They don't." Her words trailed off as she noticed what had captured everyone's attention. Cradled in the arms of Nyota, one of the adult females, was another gorilla, but this one was clearly in distress. Even from a distance, they could see the dark stains on its silver-gray fur and the way its massive head lolled to one side. "Emmanuel," Dr. Mitchell said urgently, "can you see what's wrong with that gorilla?" The guide raised his binoculars, his face growing pale as he focused on the injured animal. "It's Kubana," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Makara's eldest son. He's been shot." The revelation hit the research team like a physical blow. Kubana was well known to everyone who worked in the park, a gentle giant who had been born into captivity before being successfully reintegrated into the wild. At 15 years old, he was approaching full maturity and had been expected to eventually leave his father's group to establish his own family. Now he lay dying in his mother's arms, his life ebbing away from wounds inflicted by human hands. "We have to help him," Jenny said, tears streaming down her face. "We can't just sit here and watch him die." "Jenny, these are wild gorillas," Dr. Mitchell replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "We can't just approach them. It's dangerous and it's against every protocol." But even as she spoke, Makara was demonstrating behavior that challenged every assumption about gorilla psychology. The massive silverback approached the vehicle slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. When he was within 5 meters, he stopped and did something that left the researchers speechless.